Welcome to the podcast Running Toward. This podcast tells stories of ordinary people who couldn't look away once they saw the hidden crisis in foster care and the families impacted. Our guests share heartbreak that led them to take reluctant and unexpected small, faithful steps toward the most vulnerable in their communities. Not because they had a plan, and not because they felt ready, but because they couldn't unsee their pain. You'll hear how people living normal lives discover that getting closer changed them. Their comfort mattered less, their grip on uncertainty faded, and their faith got feet in quiet, everyday ways. Ending the crisis for one or for all isn't a quick fix. It's a long, slow, often messy journey alongside one of the most overlooked and misunderstood groups in our community. Running Toward gives you a front row seat to the hidden crisis in foster care and the families impacted, and to the ordinary people who choose not to look away.
Well, welcome back to Running Toward. And throughout the month of June, we are doing our Dad Takeover and highlighting the stories of fathers that have stepped into this space. And today, we're going to hear from a man who found himself in the world of foster care, but really it was totally not on his bingo card. And this was a man who grew up without a father and spent most of his life trying to manage risk and how to figure out how to keep his family safe and secure. And so today we have the privilege of hearing from my friend Jed Hefner, who found himself in the world of foster care. And so Jed, welcome to the podcast. We are so excited to be able to dialogue and hear your story. And as we get started, as we often do with our guests, to ask them, hey, what does life look like on a Wednesday at the Hefner house?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Chaos mostly. No, so just to give a quick primer on our family, it's my wife, Melanie, and I. We've got 3 bio kids. We right now have 2 foster kids. And so a day in the life for us looks like homeschooling our bio kids. The older of our 2 currently goes to public school. And so there's the morning drop-off routine, just like most people. Then there's trying to get through the day of getting 3 kids onto the program of the day. I generally work from home, and so I'm a contractor with the federal government and do work from my office. My wife is a stay-at-home mom, and so she's mostly schooling our kids and trying to keep everybody fed and happy, and through the various things that our kids are involved in. And that's.
So what are the ages of your kids?
Yeah, so 11, 10, 8, 6, and 2 right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, man.
So we got the gamut.
It's a hopping house for sure.
We're in the weeds for sure.
So Jed, tell me about what life was like for you growing up.
Sure. So I grew up to a single mom, never knew my dad. My mom never made over $30,000 a year. And so there were a lot of times where didn't know where my next meal was coming from. Growing boy, and I'm like, I'm going to eat and I'm going to try and survive. And that created, we all know the deal with food insecurity and how big of a problem that is. But my mom really just didn't have the skills that she needed to raise 2 kids. And there were times where, looking back on it, that had the wrong people been involved in our home or come into our home even, that almost certainly I would have been removed by today's standards. I think that probably 14, I was doing my own thing. By 16, I wasn't living at home anymore. So I was out on my own, crashing on couches and staying with friends and whatever. So that was a very different world. But I think, I talk with my wife sometimes about this, like my upbringing was not normal, I would say. And so while I see some of the grit that it evolved in me, I also recognize that like there's a balance in what I want to instill in my kids and the things that I did as a kid, right? Like growing up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and at 10 years old, riding the city bus anywhere I wanted to go because that was the only way to get around where I needed to go. And so like that self-reliance and self-sufficiency was a big part of it. But that was out of necessity because there wasn't there wasn't the support structure that needed to be there.
And so then, you grew up in that environment, and then you met your wife and get married and have your family. And I know you and I have had many conversations that you really took very seriously the role of, hey, I want to help provide for my family and protect them in ways that nobody provided for or protected me. Yeah. And that it was a huge deal for you to keep your family safe and secure. And to, you use the phrase a lot, managing risk. And so foster care is not something that people who want to manage risk usually are interested in. And so it was, again, not on your bingo card, not something that was on your radar at all, but it was on your wife's. Yeah. And so speak about that a little bit. Melanie learned about some of the issues in the foster system and was like, hey, I think we should do this.
Yeah. So before we were dating, she worked in the space. So she worked in teens transitioning out of foster care in Indiana. So 16 to 21-year-olds that were hitting the end of the cycle, and they had to develop life skills, right? Independent living. How do you apply for a job? How do you get a bank account? How do you do those things? Things that I think we take for granted. So she kind of had a very close exposure, a lot of proximity to that aspect of the space, and it had always been on her heart to adopt, really more than to foster. It was something where when we were dating, we had this conversation about, would you ever consider adoption? I was like, yeah, of course. In the back of my head thinking, well, I want to have my own kids first. But that was real. I was like, yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to adoption. I thought there's some very near parallels in my life. I had a big brother through Big Brothers Big Sisters, who he's my brother, and I'm an uncle to his kids, and he's an uncle to my kids. And that's, 30 years hence. That's been a really cool aspect of my life. But probably the closest thing to adoption that I had experienced, even though there wasn't the formal legalities of it. But really, it was something on my wife's heart. She really felt that calling. She had spent some time in Colombia and in Thailand doing some missions work before we met, and just something really heavy on her heart. But I was still in my own space at that point, right? When we were dating, when we first got married, we just started down the life or the normal path of married life, starting a family, which came earlier than we expected. About a year and a half after we got married, we got pregnant with our first, and then kind of in rapid succession, we had three. And I think the pivot for us was, and again, not at the time, but looking back on it and how sovereign God is and all that He does. When my son was born, it was a really, really hard pregnancy for us, and it kind of scared us both. At that point, we were in our mid-30s, and we were like, "Oh wow, okay, this is kind of scary. We don't want to go down this path for both Melanie and for the baby." And so we took steps to say, "Okay, we're going to be done." And I think that in hindsight, that was a hasty decision. You never hear anybody get to the end of their life and say, "I wish I had fewer kids." Right. And so like we both a couple of years later started having this yearning to be like, we wish we had more kids. We wish we were, had a bigger family. Right. But we've kind of taken that off the table, and all kind of in the middle of COVID when that was all happening. And so, it had kind of gone out of my mind until one day when Melanie's like, "Hey, I'm going to this meeting and you can come or not."
And it was at your church.
And that was at our church.
It was actually like an informational meeting that the Alliance was hosting.
Yeah, exactly. And me loving my wife was like, I want to do stuff together. So let's go. I'll go. And had no idea what the meeting was even about.
So you didn't even know what you were walking into?
Not a clue.
Just, hey, we're going to a meeting after our church gathering and whatever. And here you go.
Yeah.
So you were telling me about that info meeting and that you saw some things there, maybe even heard some statistics there that rocked you and that you could not unknow after you had heard them.
Yeah.
What were those?
Just so many things. The thing that always echoes back to me is once your consciousness is raised, it can never be lowered. And being a data guy in my day job, I'd make data-driven decisions all the time. And so some of those things, right, we've got some of those there, like the other societal ills that stem from the foster care system: chronic poverty, homelessness, sex trafficking, human trafficking in general. Those things are incarceration, right? The school to prison pipeline is a very real thing. And many of those statistics that just like were one after the other, after the other, after the other, just slapping me upside the head, saying like, how can you not be involved? How can you not do something? And I caution there, because in that meeting, we had several other, faithful believers who had walked this path, and they almost approached it like, let us talk you out of it, because it's a hard space to enter. And at that point, again, not on my radar at all, and my head is going down the path of, I could never foster. Maybe I could be open to fostering to adopt with that as the end goal. Maybe. And then just statistic after statistic after statistic. One that really resonated was when a foster child goes into their third placement, if they get moved from one foster home to another, once they go to their third, the odds of them being permanently adopted or having any permanent placement versus aging out of the system are single digits. Like what? Once a kid turns 6 years old, there's a cliff that goes, and then once that kid turns 10 years old, there's another cliff. The odds of having a good outcome are like astronomically low. Mm-hmm. And we all know why that is, right? Like the cognitive thing in your brain, if you're looking to grow your family, is, that baby over here doesn't have as much trauma. Mm-hmm. Maybe they had drugs, or maybe they had other issues going on, but they probably don't have years of trauma. Whereas that 10-year-old, I'm going to have them in my home less time than they've had to be in the system. How can I ever undo that, right? So people don't even try. And so those kinds of things were really just resonating with me, I think, with Melanie, in terms of we've got to get involved somehow. We've got to do something.
Yeah, and I remember after you went to that info meeting, you called us up and said, hey, we've got some questions. Our family at the time had been probably like 5 years deep into our foster journey, our foster care journey. And he said, hey, can we just get together and ask some really like honest questions, right? And so we're sitting there, and I'll never forget this. And I'm holding a taco, and I'm eating a taco, and I'm talking to you. And you said something about like adoption, and I said, well, something about foster care. And you look at me directly, and you go, I will never foster. And you like said it almost like I was like, okay, man, like I'm going to drop my taco, and I'm good. And you're like, I will never foster. Yeah. And for you, it was kind of, I think, tied to the managing risk. And like, what was it that you were trying to protect yourself from, or your family from?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really heavy place, right? Because when you think about adoption, most people are thinking private adoption. Most people are thinking, I have some level of certainty. I'm going to cut a check, and I'm going to get a child, right? Mm-hmm. And it's paperwork and legalities, but it's pretty much a done deal. And the foster system is very different in that that's not the goal of the foster system. By and large, the primary goal is always reunification. Mm-hmm. And again, being a data guy, that goes back to the data. The outcomes are best when a child is placed with their family. And so if, yes, sorry, there's a lot of different ways that I would like to go with that conversation. So when there is a foster child versus an adoptive child, the risk that you face is you invite a foster child into your home, you incorporate them into your family, you begin to love on them, you build bonds with them, and then they leave. And sometimes they don't just leave, sometimes they're ripped away from you. And good friends, again, faithful believers coming along in this space who are saying this is a possibility. Until the point rights are terminated, that child could leave. And we experienced that with our first placement. We had a child for about 10 weeks, was a month old when we got him. He was with us for about 10 weeks. We got a call on Friday. On Monday, he went back. And that was incredibly hard. But I'm jumping the shark on the story because when we're just kind of entering the space, that was my fear. My fear was, no, I don't have multiple, there's not this like spectrum of love that I can give. I'm either all in or I'm going to put up a barrier,
Right.
a self-protective barrier for me and my family that we're not going to be able to fully love a child. And that child's going to be able to know that.
Right.
They're going to immediately sense it, right?
For sure.
And so I was like, I can't do that because I have to protect my family. And then I think it was Jocelyn that mentioned, that really crystallized it for me. She said something along the lines of, what's more important? Your comfort as a 40-year-old man, 40-plus-year-old man, your comfort in being able to protect your heart, or these children who don't have a safe place to be. They're going to be in the floor of a caseworker's office, or they're going to be in a shelter, or they're going to be on the street. And like, what's really more important? And so that was a check on my heart, and saying like, why are you trying to control this so much?
Yeah.
And I really felt where God spoke to me through you and your family, through Jocelyn, through the Alliance, through the Dad's Retreat. Like, there were so many different places where God was just speaking to me and saying, you're trying to control this, let go. And just let my will be done. And that was really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard, right? To say, for someone who for so long in my life, I didn't have control. So once as an adult, I was able to get control and able to provide and protect my family, I'm not letting go of that.
Because you worked hard and
Yeah.
you did everything
Yeah.
you could to build your castle
Exactly.
and protect, and you want to build a
Exactly.
dang moat around your castle.
Exactly.
And that's what we say, right?
what
Like, we
dads
want
do.
to insulate and isolate, right? Like, hard things come, we're going to go into our castle. Why are we going to, open the walls essentially?
Yeah.
And so, no, I get that. So you guys go to the info meeting.
Yep.
You end up saying, okay, the Lord's like working on your heart, and you're going, hey, you know what? Let's just take the step and let's go through these courses and get trained. And while you were probably like, what, 3/4 of the way done.
Yep.
I don't know if you were getting cold feet, but you were maybe dragging your feet. If it's not cold feet, maybe a little.
Yeah,
And
it was a little bit of logistics, a little bit of like not ready to fully jump in. I travel for work sometimes, and it seemed like the last couple of trainings that we had to do were always being scheduled at the time when I was out of town for work. And so like I couldn't be there, or I would have to impact my work to be able to be there for that training. How do I make that work? And it was we were probably 80% done, and then we went to the.
And I remember calling you to be like,
yeah.
dude, you should just come on the Dad's Retreat. Just come.
Yeah.
Because I knew,
Well,
dude, there's
again, it wasn't on my radar.
no way
Yeah.
you're going to be in this group
Yeah.
of, 40 plus men that have all done this and not be able to rub shoulders with some guys, get some questions answered. And so what happened for you personally on that Dad's Retreat that kind of like almost gave you just this boost?
Yeah. So a couple things. Like I felt like we had spent a lot of time methodically and faithfully walking through the trainings, really being considerate and thoughtful of the many inputs and outputs of the space. And the couple of things that happened at that retreat, I heard some honest and raw testimonies from other dads who had walked the space. I heard about a dad who had some very severe false allegations made by a placement. I heard from a dad who, CPS had investigated him because of having a foster placement in his home with his own bio kids. And these are like the fears again that I'm thinking in the back of my head. And I'm like, how did you navigate that? Right. And the thing that just kept coming back over and over was just being obedient and being faithful to the calling and trusting that those things are not a surprise to God and that they are not something he can't overcome. And so push all the chips in and get into the middle, right? And then, Josh came and he spoke and just in a really powerful way talked about kind of his journey. And I think that all of those things kind of compounded. It wasn't necessarily like one flashbulb moment, but it was like God working through all of these different areas and all of these kind of seemingly unrelated people. But the thing that they all had in common was that they had been faithful, that they had stepped into the space, and that they had said, I will do this. Even though it's not comfortable, I will trust you, Lord, to walk alongside me and provide whatever is needed. And so I think I left that retreat and I was just like, I went home and I remember asking Melanie and being like, is there any reason we can't be licensed in 2 weeks? And she's like, what? I'm sorry, what? And so I kind of shared some of that with her, of the things that happened. There were tears and there were just like this pit of stomach feeling of like, where do we do with this? And I think that's what accelerated our path to eventually getting licensed.
And so, I want to ask this also, like now and then, even when you're in foster care, we're going to get to that in a second. But what role did community play in your journey? Like friends, brothers, sisters walking with you, encouraging you. What role did community play?
So again, starting from that info meeting, we met several others at our church who had walked the space. And so we're hearing their story, we're hearing their testimony, we're hearing their challenges and their struggles, and we're asking questions about like, well, what's available, what's there? We're learning about different agencies. And so we learned about, obviously, the Alliance from the info meeting, but there's all these different agencies out there. And we're like, again, as we're trying to control it, we're like, which agency really fits best for what we want to do? Right? And there's a little bit of like beating our chest, like, well, this is how we're going to do it. And then, through all of that, it's like, okay, this is here and that's kind of that, but it's not really. And then we'd interview with an agency that supposedly focused on foster to adopt only. And they're like, well, yes, but this, and that doesn't fit with what you want. And so it really just became hey, let's be prayerful about it and really follow the Lord's leading. And he brought us into community with so many other families who talked about, in the years that they've been in the space, the things that they've learned. And we were able to soak all that in before we ever opened our home. Yeah. And we were able to really prepare and plan efficiently and effectively in a way that when our first placement came, when we licensed and our first placement came, they called us at 4:00 and they were like, we have a 1-month-old coming straight out of NICU. Can you take him? And we're like, yeah. Okay, we'll be there in 2 hours. And so I think I called you and I was like, can you, I've got to go get formula.
People are like getting diapers and running all over.
Yeah. And so it was what was just amazing. And will be something that I remember for the rest of my life is within that 24-hour period, the number of people who outpoured into us. We had a crib and we had we had some baby clothes, I think, but that was like it. And then in the space of 24 hours, we had a swing and we had a stroller and we had a car seat and we had a copious amount of diapers and just all these
people
things.
Bringing meals.
And not just for like the baby, but for the other 5 members of our family. Right. So like what has just been amazing in terms of the support from the community has been like your family's coming into this and it's not just that we're going to come support that child. We're going to support your entire family. And so like we've had a lady who has brought a meal to us on Mondays twice a month because Monday was the day that was like our chaos day, right? That's when our homeschool co-op was. That was the first day of the public school week that created kind of the adjustment every single week of I'm home versus I'm in school, right? So Mondays were just chaos. And so this one sweet family who also had fostered, who now has adopted kiddos who are grown, and they've walked that space. They sat down and talked with our kids, not just us, but with our kids, to say, like, the grown kids who were the same age as our kids are now when they first walked into the space, saying, like, hey, we're feeling these things because we know you're feeling them because we felt them and we were there. And just having so many people surround has been just such a blessing. And the thing that I'll kind of like say to the people watching on this topic is we also heard testimony of sweet, sweet friends who had walked this path and who didn't have that support. And the amount of struggle and pain and difficulty was exponential because they didn't have that support. And so when it comes to, like, what can a faith community do? Like, you don't have to be the family that's jumping in the middle of the river. You can be the family that comes and brings a meal.
Right.
I kid you not, we have a woman in our church who has come over to our home. She has 4 children of her own. And at the time she was pregnant, and she came over to our home to help clean our bathrooms. Like, who does that, right?
It's crazy.
But it's just an amazing testimony of the body of Christ coming around and doing these things that are like, when you're overwhelmed and when you're drowning and you're there, that's a lifeline. And when you have when you see a family who didn't experience that, like, there's a little bit of guilt that we have felt of, like, wow, we've been incredibly blessed. And we hear the horror stories, and by and large, it hasn't ever felt like that because we've had that support.
Yeah.
And that just outpouring of love and provision that I can't say anything other than is absolutely divine. Right.
Man,
which has been so amazing.
Praise God. So kind of like peeling back the curtain a little bit into, like, the logistics of foster care and what that's looked like for you personally. I mean, you describe yourself as, like, a liberty-minded man.
Yep.
Like, you enjoy freedom and don't like people telling you what to do and getting all up in your business.
Yeah.
And so what's it been like for you essentially co-parenting with the state?
Oh, it's
like,
hard. Yeah. There's a level of frustration when you don't have control. But it's daily surrender. For people who know me, like my close friends, I'm very, I would say I'm very much a free thinker. And, like, if you tell me to do something, I will almost not do it because you told me to do it. Right. Like, that's just contrarian. And maybe that's a place where I'm still being sanctified. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, opening the door to your home to the state. I think about, like, the level of surveillance that the government has in our lives, and then willingly saying, I'm going to open my door and let an agent of the state come into my home and judge how I'm parenting, has been really hard. Now, what's been really, really cool about that, and again, I can only ascribe it to God's divinity, is our caseworker in our current case, has directly told us that he would never have considered homeschooling a viable option for a child. Like, he thought he was absolutely against it. And not because we've been banging the drums, being like, everybody should homeschool. No, it's not been that. It's just been, like, the daily walking and the daily faithfulness. And then he sees not just the foster kids, but he sees our bio kids because he's in our home, right? And he sees the way that they behave, and he sees the things that they're learning at their age level. And he's like, yeah, like, you want to homeschool? I'm fully supportive. And it's been like a 180. And so I feel like there's some element of that liberty mindset that, like, doesn't want to let the state into your home. But on the other side, it's like, if we invite the state into our home, or if we just invite other people into our other human beings, and they get to see our light shine in the most vulnerable and unguarded way. Like I'm not putting on airs when my kids hit one another, or when my kids, like, somebody takes a toy and then somebody ends up crying. Like, okay, but I'm going to try and walk gracefully through that. And that testimony, without saying a word, is much more powerful and will change hearts and minds in a way that no amount of bully pulpit ever will.
Sure, 100%.
And so I think that when you involve the state, it's really challenging to be willing to make yourself vulnerable. But in doing so, there's been a really rich, kind of unexpected flipping of the script, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for you, obviously a guy that likes liberty and freedom, but also a guy that's not afraid to, like, stand up and say what's right and speak your mind. How hard has it been for you to, like, know these kids and get to love these kids and care for them and take care of them and be responsible? And then the courtroom, it happens and you can't say a word and you can't speak up. How challenging has that been for you?
Oh, it's hard. It's, oh man. I bring a little bit of project manager to the table. Right. And maybe reluctantly so, but out of necessity. So like in preparation for court, right, it's really hard to think that ad litem in particular, right? I was listening to another one of the podcast episodes, and the ad litem might be an hour out of a 6-month period that they even have a conversation with you.
If you're lucky, in some cases,
right?
yeah.
And then they're the ones that are going into court and able to speak and ask for things or not ask for things, and represent you, right? There's a lot of soft influence that's really needed, because you can't stand up in court and say, hey, I'm the foster parent. Like, I have no standing in the case. I'm just a agent of the state now, in the parenting responsibility that's been outsourced. And so when I walk into court, or when we go virtually now, but I'm going to court, and I know that before that court hearing, I've had a conversation with CASA. I've had a conversation with our caseworker. I've had multiple conversations with our caseworker. I've had, a couple of conversations with the ad litem, maybe 10 minutes. But how do you sum up, like, all of the things and all of the trauma and all of the difficulties and the struggles, and like, we see this chain of events between, bio parents' behavior and keeping the kids in the dark, right? Because caseworkers often just think the kids don't know what's going on. A lot of times they don't know what's going on because they don't get told, right? But then in the back of our minds, we're like, well, how can we be the ones to tell them? Because if we're the ones to break this news, it's going to be devastating to that relationship. And what's our long-term goal? If our long-term goal is reunification, it's a wash. But if our long-term goal ends up being, like, we're going to provide a home for these kids for as long as they need, until there is a safe place or we become their safe place, then we can't risk that relationship. And so there's a lot of, like, hey, I need to influence you in a way that you're going to deliver the message that's a really hard message to give a kid, but I need you to give that message, because if I do, that doesn't serve the long-term goal. And I think that, when it comes to getting ready for that court hearing and knowing that you have no control over the outcome, knowing that with a 3-second offhanded comment, your case could get extended 6 months. Like, it's, and you see it coming, and you just, like, have this pit in your stomach, but you're like, God is working all things for his glory.
Yeah.
And you have to have, again, that daily dying to self to say, like, I want to control this, but right now I can't.
Yeah.
So what can I do?
I totally resonate with that. And it's driven me to a different level of trust in the Lord and just saying, okay, ultimately, these kids do not belong to me.
Yeah.
And even my own kids don't belong to me, right?
Yeah.
They are the Lord's, but it's just driven me to a deeper level of dependence. You know, one of the things you had mentioned to me in just private conversation is how is this going to affect our children? You know, how is this going to affect this decision to foster is going to affect your children? How has it affected your children? How has this journey of, hey, we had this little boy for 10 weeks, and then now you've got two boys that are 6 and 2. You've had them for 9+ months.
Yeah, about 9.5 months now. Yeah.
And how has it affected your kids?
Yeah. So my middle daughter, she on Saturday, this past Saturday, so 3 days ago, we're getting out of the car, coming back from a soccer game, and there's an interaction with one of the foster kids that she didn't like. And so she immediately breaks down into tears, storms off, takes this beautiful drawing that she's an artist, she'd been working on for a couple of days, and like in the middle of the yard, just tears it up, throws it. Nothing matters. And then I kind of give her some space, and I come out about 10 minutes later, and she's climbing up in a tree, and she's bawling, and she's saying, why? Why does God do these things? Why did we have to become foster parents? I hate this. Why did I say yes? I wish I'd never said yes, because we asked our kids before we took a placement. We said, this is the placement that they have, and so in this particular example, this particular child loves dogs. And at the time we got the placement, we thought they told us we think one of the boys is allergic to dogs, and that's why they're moving them from their current foster home into ours. And we were also at the time about to get a dog, and we had to put that on hold, and that devastated her. But she at the time submitted to that and was like, yeah, this is what we're called to do. And 3 days later, 9 months down the journey, she's like, why did we do this? How do I know God even exists? She's asking these questions as a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And she's like, why would God allow this kind of pain? Why would God allow, and so it opens the door for some really hard but really rich conversation. But it's also gut-wrenching to see my daughter feeling that way because of these other kids. And at the same time, I have to hold space to say, no, right now, he's my son. Right now, I have to love him, and I have to navigate this. There's not these kind of like second-class citizens. It's like, no, you are all children. Because why? Because we are all adopted into the family of God. And so if I'm coming at it with that heart, but it doesn't make it any easier. It doesn't make it any easier to look at my daughter in absolute misery and explain to her, like, this is our calling. And God didn't promise it. I saw this beautiful analogy this week, and I shared it with her during this conversation. And it was a waterfall doesn't become beautiful without the boulders in the way. It's just a quiet, peaceful stream. But it's because of the boulders that the water has to go around, and it starts to rush, and then it comes off, and then you have this just beautiful demonstration of God's glory. But it was because of those boulders. And there's a metaphor in there of like, well, the boulders in our lives might be that difficult kid. The boulders in our lives might be getting a no answer, being told no when we want something. Boulder might be like not getting your way. It might be dealing with really hard stuff. But it produces that beauty. And my daughter's response beautifully for a 10-year-old was, I would have rather just be a peaceful stream. And I'm like, well, you know what, baby? You are already a beautiful waterfall because of what this has done, and God is going to continue to sanctify that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you feel like, as a dad, listening to this and going, man, well, gee, my 10-year-old just said this, and wow, how is that a sell for this space?
It's not.
and like going, okay, well, do you feel like in some senses that, man, because our children are exposed to the heart of life and because the world doesn't revolve around them, in many ways, like if our goal is to disciple them and make them more like Jesus, foster care is a great vehicle for that?
Oh, yeah. Love God and love people, right? If you are loving God, that means you are following after his heart. James 1:27 tells us exactly where the heart of God is.
Right.
It's to care for widows and orphans in their distress. And so this is the heart of God. Does that mean that God promises us an easy road? No. Every single person that followed Christ in his contemporaries had a very difficult life.
Right.
And all but one were martyred. They died for it.
Right.
Right. And so we're not promised an easy life, but we're promised that if we love God, we're going to love the things God loves. That means the hard kids. That means the broken families. That means the orphans and the widows. I'll throw single moms in there as well, having come from one, right? Like if it wasn't for people in the church, I don't know, my life would have been on a completely different trajectory. And so if you have a care about loving God, how can you not be where he is? And then how do we do that is we love people. And that might be a foster child, or it might be coming alongside a family before fracture, or it might be helping support someone in crisis, or it might be mentoring a teen. There's a million different, it might be being a CASA. Right, our current CASA is a paramedic. She's not a legal scholar.
Right,
you don't have to be an attorney. Like she simply is an advocate, and so, she's a 24-year-old, right? But she is willing to step out and say, "I will be the voice for those who don't have a voice."
Right,
and 100%. So I think that's the heart.
And I when I asked you that question, I didn't know that you were going to tell that story, and I didn't know the direction that was going to go in. But I mean, I'm really glad, because this is not like, hey, we're gonna be able to keep our kids comfortable and keep them happy, and they're not going to have hard questions. No, you better brace yourself. Yeah. But the reality is, like, man, we are called into the mess, and when we hold our kid's hand, and guess what? She's going to learn these lessons at the age of 10. That you and I had to learn in our 30s, and so no, it's just so beautiful. And as we wrap this up, you 9 months in, and you still don't know like what the future holds with these kids. How do you as a guy that likes to be in control, how do you manage that particular uncertainty with these boys, not knowing hey, what's going to happen?
I seek wise counsel. I'm transparent in my thoughts, and I wear my heart on my sleeve. And I don't try to carry it all myself because that burden would be unbearable. But when I say I seek wise counsel, I ask many people the same question. And that question is, how much and when and how do I lean in? Right? Do I begin advocating? Because you kind of have these two competing things you have to hold on to. You have to hold on to reunification and say, like, these kids could go back home. And I have to I have to hope mom in rehab is able to finish her program so that she can be on a path to sobriety, so that she can build the structure and the support that she needs in her life to be able to get her kids back.
Right.
I have to hope for that. I have to pray for that. I have to want that. At the same time, I have to hope for this other thing that is completely antithetical to that. It's the opposite end of the spectrum. I have to hope that if these kids can't go home, I have to hope, and I have to work for, and I have to prepare for the fact that we're their second foster home, right? The stats, go back to the stats. Yeah. I'm not going to let them go to a third foster home and their chance of ever being adopted drop to a single digit. I'm not going to do that. And so we know that maybe they'll go home. We also know that mom could get out of rehab and turn right back around and be off the wagon as soon as she gets out of an inpatient facility. And so if that happens, like, the pathway to termination is fairly close. And so I have to say, if rights are terminated, when do I start leaning in on saying, I want to begin going down a path of what is our long-term goal? I want to be able to homeschool my boys. I want to be able to have all of our kids doing the same thing together. I want to have the freedom to fly out of state without having to ask the court for an order to do so.
Sure.
I want to be able to go. One reason we homeschool is because we get to travel and we get to do things that don't happen on a school's schedule. And so I work in Washington, D.C. fairly often. And I've had the opportunity to take our bio kids to Washington, D.C. And see some American history that is just so rich and deep in that area. And I would love to be able to plant those seeds for our foster boys. Right now, I can't do that without a court order. I can't transport a minor over state lines without a court order. So there's challenges there. And it's like, okay, we want to go and do these things as a family. We have goals as a family. I want to instill perspectives, right, and worldview in our kids beyond just go to church and go to Sunday school, right? We're doing those things in our family where we read our Bibles and we're worshiping together and those kinds of things. But if I want to tell my kids taxation is theft, I want to be able to tell them that. Yeah. Right? And so that doesn't just include my own kids, that includes our foster kids too. But what happens when we have those really hard conversations about, my foster son asked me the other day, he goes, when somebody gets arrested while they're driving, what happens to their car? Where'd that come from? Right?
6 years old. Yeah, that's not a typical 6-year-old question.
I need to have a conversation, right? And so I want the freedom to be able to have those conversations on my own terms without having to walk on eggshells.
Right.
Because part of what makes us human is that we can be authentic.
But I think what I really appreciate about this is that you want that.
Yeah.
But you're also willing to not have that because you care enough about these kids. And so last question is a two-parter. What's your advice to a woman who's listening to this, whose husband may, I don't know if you want to call it, I don't know what word, fill in the blank, hard-headed, maybe scared, maybe stubborn, maybe fearful, whatever word you want to use. What's your advice to the wife who really feels pulled into this space, but husband is not on board, number one? Yeah.
Have you guys done some demographic stuff on this to like know women listen more than men? No, I think that's great. My advice to that woman would be pray for your husband. Like, I mean, you ought to be doing that anyway, please. We husbands, fathers, we need to be soaked in prayer. And so there's nothing more that, frankly, turns me on about my wife than she prays for me regularly. And so like, let me fall in love with her because she's praying for me, and I will run through a brick wall. And I don't know any man that wouldn't do the same. So do that. Be transparent about your desires and about your heart and where God's leading you. I think any man who is following after God also has to be humble enough to know that the helper that God has provided for him can guide him. And I love this term helper because it's the same word Jesus uses for the Holy Spirit. And when we think about that, people often go down the path of like women, the inferior sex, and whatever. It's like, no, there's power there.
Oh yeah.
And so any man needs to be able to humble himself to listen to his wife, but for that to happen, that wife has to be open with her husband and tell him the desires of her heart.
For sure.
Yeah. So that's the answer to your question. I could take that in a couple of other ways.
I love it. And then lastly, what's your advice to a man who's listening to this, who is going, hey, man, Jed, I resonate with a lot of where you were at. What's your advice to him?
there's the daily dying of self. I think I've hit on that. There's an element of wives, obey your husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And we slip over that second part, right? To the point of death. Love your wife and honor her in a way that you're willing to sacrifice to the point of death. As a man, I believe, like, our society will tell you different things about masculinity and whatever, but I believe that our role is one of a protector and a provider. And if we can protect and we can provide, but we can also lead. And we need to lead in a way that is sacrificial. We need to lead in a way that says, I might want the things I want, but I'm going to set those things aside. If you look back, my wife and I have been married 13 years now, I think. She'll get a kick out of that one. But when we first got married, when we first moved to Texas, I was very involved in football. And I was doing football 6 days a week between reffing and watching games and everything else. And I don't know the last time I watched a football game. Right? Now, that took years for me, but once I got to a point where I was like, I would just rather spend my time doing something else. Like, and again, no judgment on a guy. If you love football, great, more power to you. But just think about where you're spending your time. Take it seriously. Yeah. Take it seriously and take 2 weeks and honestly audit your time and decide, are the places where you're spending your time the places where you're having impact and adding value.
I love it. Well, Jed, I got a lot of love and respect for you, man. I'm grateful for your example and just your story of growing up, being fatherless, and now you are a father to the fatherless. And I respect you, and I'm grateful for you, and thank you for being willing to share your story with us. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in as we continue on our series in the month of June with the Dad Takeover and just looking into the stories of dads. And so we encourage you to tune in next time to Running Toward, and please share this with a friend. Thanks so much.